Okay, guys, I wanted to pick up this discussion here and kind of finish off the discussion on making money and profit in stocker and feedlot cattle. And kind of where we left off in class was we went over cost of gain and value of gain. And basically, I said that profit is the difference between value of gain and cost of gain. So if you take value of gain minus cost of gain, that's the profit that you make per pound of gain that you add to an animal. And if you just multiply that number times the gain that you add, well, that's your total profit per head. Okay. So, and I made this point here that the cost of the original 550-pound steer that we were using in our example, the cost of that original steer really just isn't too important in the grand scheme once you start thinking about profit this way. And I wanted to go in and explain more of why that is. Okay, so the reason is that you're going to sell those 550 pounds that you bought, you're going to sell those original 550 pounds back into the market, plus the 365 pounds that you added in the phase that you owned the animal. So what's really important here is the value of the pounds that you add and what that costs, what it costs you to add those pounds. Okay, so that's really the key point. There's a phenomenon in the cattle market. A few of us were talking about it the other day in class. There's a phenomenon in the cattle market called rollback, whereas when cattle get heavier, the price per pound goes down. Okay, so and you can actually kind of calculate the amount of rollback in a specific scenario you're evaluating or on a specific set of cattle. And basically, you just take the selling price per pound and subtract the purchase price per pound. Okay, and almost always, if you go look at any cattle market, almost always in stocker and feedlot cattle, the heavier cattle get, the lower the price per pound. Okay, so if you buy a 550-pound steer, for example, you might buy that steer at $1.55 per pound or $1.55 a hundredweight. And you can sell that, maybe sell a 950-pound steer or 915-pound steer at $1.30 per pound. Okay, so the rollback in this scenario right here that we're looking at would be the difference in these two prices, and that would be 25 cents per pound rollback, or $25 per hundredweight rollback in this scenario. So the issue here is that because you're buying those 550, the initial 550-pound steer at 155, but you have to sell those 550 pounds back into the market, and those are worth 25 cents a pound less than you paid for them. So you kind of have a rollback or a cheapening of the original steer that you bought. Okay. So those original 550 pounds that you bought, if you think of it this way, the original 550 pounds are worth $137.50 less than they were when you bought them. So when you go to sell the steer, when you sell this 915-pound steer at the end of your production phase, you're selling back those original 550 pounds that you bought, but you're having to take $137.50 less for those original pounds. And the reason for that is because there's rollback in the price. Okay, now let's go through this a little bit of a discussion biologically and economically. Why does this happen? Why does rollback happen in the cattle market? Okay, why rollback exists? And one way to think about it is that very young, very lightweight cattle are expensive to produce. Right? If you think about what it takes to produce a baby calf, the lightest, youngest animal you can have, a baby calf requires a cow to make them and to make them grow, to raise them. Baby calves have a whole lot of potential growth, and they don't weigh very much. Right? So they got a lot of potential in front of them. They're not very big. They don't weigh very much, and it costs a lot to make them. It basically costs maintaining a cow for a whole year to make a baby calf, right? So they've got a lot of expense tied up in them, and they don't weigh very much. So that makes them worth a lot per pound, right? They're hard to make. They're hard to make them grow. It's expensive to make them grow because you have to have a cow to take care of them. They don't weigh very much. They're worth a lot per pound. Okay. Weaned calves. Let's compare that to a weaned calf, a 500-pound calf that you wean off a cow. Weaned calves no longer require expensive cows. Okay, they just need feed. All they need is feed to grow. They're cheaper to add pounds to than a baby calf is. You can, if you've got a feed source, you can make a weaned calf grow. You don't need to have a cow to take care of it, right? They're also bigger. They've used up part of their potential growth. They don't have as much potential growth in front of them left, and so they're worth less per pound, right? So adding pounds to an animal uses up the potential growth that exists in small calves. And it dilutes that expensive small calf, that live, the entity of the live animal, it dilutes that expensive small calf by adding more pounds to it, right? So you can kind of think like it's expensive and valuable to create the calf in the first place, but then it's cheaper to add pounds to that calf once he's already created, right? So if that's kind of the reason that you see rollback happen in the cattle market. Okay, the amount of rollback is highly dynamic and variable. Okay, in almost all situations in the cattle market in the United States where rollback exists, it happens, but the amount and how dramatic it is really dynamic. It depends on the availability of cattle, on the cost of feed, on grass conditions, on feedlot capacity, on demand for cattle, all these kind of things. Projections of all of those conditions 1 to 6 months into the future also are kind of wrapped up in the rollback that you see in a cattle market. So all those things affect the amount of rollback. I've only experienced one time since I've been paying any attention to the cattle business that the rollback kind of sort of disappeared and didn't have much rollback in basically weaned calves and feeder cattle and fat cattle were all worth about the same price per pound. But that only happened one real short time, and the rest of the time you see rollback. Okay. So let's look at value of gain again and think about it this way. We're kind of remember that value of gain is the added value of the gain you put on a calf. Okay. And because there's almost always rollback in the price, the value of gain should always be less than the selling price. Okay. And if you're not convinced of that, you can kind of go back and look at some of the numbers and try different examples, and you'll see that the value of gain of a set of calves is always less than their selling price. Okay? And the reason is because you buy an expensive smaller calf, then you have to sell it back at a lower price, but you put some more pounds with it, right? But those original pounds that you bought, you have to sell them back at a lower price. So that works out to be that the value of gain is always less than the selling price because of rollback. Okay. So here's a couple of homework things you should do. Go look at what's the value of gain of steers right now at your favorite sale barn. So you could pick a sale barn that you can get a market report for. You can look at the market report for OKC West and El Reno that we publish for you for your project. And you could evaluate, you could look on there and see what's the price of 500-pound steers, and then look down and see what's the price of 800-pound steers. And you could calculate, going through that formula I showed you, you could calculate the value of gain of those 300 pounds from a 500-pound steer to an 800-pound steer. You could calculate what the value of that gain is today, right? You can use any market report that you want to do that. You can look at different weights of steers. You can look at steers versus heifers, all those kind of things, right? So Another question kind of for you to explore and experiment with this concept is something to think about. How much difference is there between the cost of gain and the break-even value of gain? And if you've never heard of the term break-even before, we'll get into that later in the class too. But break-even is the price that it takes for you to have zero profit in an enterprise, right? So if you've got if we were selling pickups, and let's say that you bought a pickup for $10,000 and you had to put $1,000 set of tires on it. Okay, so you've got $11,000 invested in this pickup. Well, your break-even price to sell that pickup for is $11,000. The pickup's break-even is $11,000. You've got to get $11,000 for it to have zero profit, right? So that's what break-even is. You hear that term a whole lot in cattle budgets. So something to think about is how much difference is there between the cost of gain and the break-even value of gain. Okay, and so the break-even value of gain would be the value of gain where there's no profit. So those are a couple things to think about. I don't think of anything else to throw at you right here, but if you got questions, sure, go ahead and shoot them to me on Canvas, and we'll certainly have a shot at answering them. I hope that gives you a little bit of background in profit of stockers and feeders. Thanks.